Hello everybody, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I have my May wrap up. So May was not a great reading month for me at all. I've mentioned it across many videos throughout the month because it has affected my entire month. But my mental health was just really bad throughout literally the entirety of May, up until I want to say the last maybe week. So you can rest assured I'm probably going to stop mentioning it now because I'm in a much better place than I was this time last month. But it has had a very big impact on the amount of books that I've been able to read, because sadly when I'm not doing too great mentally, I really wish I was somebody who could dive into a book and like lose myself. But what happens is my attention is just not there because I'm thinking about all of this other stuff that essentially I shouldn't be thinking about, because like what can you do about the things that make you anxious? Most of the time nothing, but it really does prevent me from reading. Right now I'm in a better place where I'm enjoying reading again. So I'm hoping that June is going to be my month, but I'm not 100% sure. And you may notice there's something missing from my background here, which is a really big Trillian ivy because we just got a puppy and she's great. She's wonderful. She's the sweetest, most precious being. You are going to see her more in upcoming vlogs. Maybe not the next one that comes because we only got her like towards the end of that vlog, and she is just a full-on experience is the best way that I can describe her. She's a Labrador, so she wants to put absolutely everything into her mouth at all times. And we actually got her, she's 11 weeks old, but we got her from a family who had gotten her not too long ago because they thought that she would be a good fit for their son, and their son sadly just was not gelling with her at all, so they were looking to rehome, and we've taken her on. She is the most precious, but she, like I said, she's very hands-on, so I can't just sit and read because I have to check her out, supervise her, see what she's doing at all times. I know a lot of you guys will be asking how Hamilton's doing with her. They're getting on okay. He doesn't like her, but they do sniff each other, and then if she gets too close to him, he hisses, like kind of bats her, asserts his dominance a little bit, which is one of the reasons why we wanted a puppy, so that he was able to do that instead of being dominated like in his own home. So yeah, they don't like each other yet, but we're in an adjustment period right now, and the effects on him haven't been negative. Like, he's not scared of her, he's not avoiding living his life as he normally would because of her, aside from having to go around and out of his way a little bit to get out of the back door because we're mainly keeping her in the kitchen right now, obviously because it's easier for cleaning and stuff. So yeah, that's going to take up a lot of my month, but aside from that I don't have any plans. I'm going to be home for the foreseeable future because of the puppy, which she's called Brie, so fingers crossed we'll get some reading done. But anyway, getting on to my stats for this month, I only read 5 books, but they added up to a total of 1,613 pages, which is an average of 52 pages per day. Probably, I think I've had one month like this before, but this could very well be my worst month since I've had a booktube channel, and next month I think we're coming up on 5 years now. And for the star ratings, the quality was a little better than last month. We had 1 2-star read, 1 3-star, 2 4 stars, and 1 5, breaking down to an average of 3.6 stars per book, which is about what my typical average is. For the demographics, we had 1 young adult and 4 adult books. For the formats, we had 3 standardly formatted novels, 1 novella, and 1 comic. For the genres, we had 2 fantasy, 1 sci-fi, 1 thriller, and 1 fantasy romance. And finally, for the places where I sourced these books from, 3 of them I've hauled in 2022, and 2 of them were from my own TBR that existed prior to the start of 2022. So getting into the books that I actually read, the first one I had to read because we were coming up to the live show for Fool's Assassin by Robin Hobb, and honestly, when you're not doing too good, you're struggling to read, it was a challenge. It was a challenge to get through, but I really enjoyed this. It was 5 stars, which is really just what I needed because it had been so long since I've had a 5-star read, and I really liked this a lot. I loved it. This is the first book in the Fits and the Fool series, which is the final series in Robin Hobb's Realm of the Eldlings, and it is our final trilogy following Fitz. So we followed him from being 6 to 8 years old in the very first book, Assassin's Apprentice, and here he starts off, I think he's 48 right at the beginning, but very quickly we're like catching up on where his life is at now, and I think the majority of this trilogy plays out when he is just about 60. So if you don't know what the Realm of the Eldlings is, a lot of it is following this character of Fitz, who when he is a very small child is abandoned at the keep by his maternal grandfather, who wants him to go back to his father. Fitz is actually the bastard son of the prince in waiting, Prince Chivalry, and Chivalry, when he finds out that Fitz is on his way to him, quickly abdicates the throne and moves to the countryside. So when Fitz arrives at Bookkeep, there's nobody there to really look after him. So he is mainly raised by the stable Master Burrich, who was close to his father, up until he comes of an age where the king starts to take an interest in him and begins his training as the royal assassin, as he's in this perfect position where he is the bastard son of a prince, so he is kind of like royalty nobility, but he's a bastard, so he's also a commoner. This one was sad. This one was really sad, and it had a plot twist that really just took me by surprise and in a very painful way. But at this point, I'm just so attached to these characters that I'm just so excited and interested in where they're ending up. I'm so used to Robin Hobb's writing that it is very comforting to me now, because when I start a Hobb book, in terms of the writing and the pacing, I know exactly what I'm getting. These books are very slow-paced books as well, which there's something about that when I'm so familiar with a series that really soothes my soul. And actually, in terms of the Realm of the Elderlings as a whole, I think at the minute, because I've only read the first book in this series, The Live Ship Traders is still my favorite trilogy, but this is the best Fitz book in a very long time. I think that this book outshines any of the books in the Tawny Man trilogy, which is the middle trilogy. So it's probably for me the best book since book number 2, which is Royal Assassin. I knew going into this from our live shows that we were going to get a couple of new perspectives in this, which is very unusual for a Fitz book, because while the Live Ship Traders and the Rainwild Chronicles are multi-perspective and deal more with the world as a whole, the Fitz books are very isolated in that you are first person perspective in his head, dwelling on all of the things that really matter to him. So more interesting things could be happening around him, but he is, as we all are as humans, very singularly focused on the things that directly affect him. So it was really interesting to get a new perspective in here, and the perspective that we got, like I had some ideas going into this who I thought it might be, and the perspective we got is nothing like what I thought it was going to be. It completely took me by surprise. This one was an emotional roller coaster. I know this trilogy is going to break me, but a 5-star start to the trilogy, and I'm really excited to continue. We then had the 48-hour bookoplathon where I read 3 books, so like the majority of the reading that I did do during the month happened across one weekend. And the first thing I did for the bookoplathon was finish off Rat Queens finally. I've been reading this series since 2018 and I've only just got to the end. So Rat Queens is an adult comic series that follows 4 boozy battle maidens for hire, and they get into one bar fight too many, end up in jail, and to be released they have to perform quests for the realm. So this is a swords and sorcery style series, so it's very like episodic and quest based, with a little bit of an overarching plot that starts to kick in around the 3rd volume and wraps up in volume 8. As I've gone on throughout the series, this series started off really strong. I can't remember if I gave the first volume 5 stars, but if not, it was definitely 4, and it started off so strong and I really loved it. And then as we got to volume 3-4, it very steadily declined up until this, which is the lowest rated volume for me. I gave this one 2 stars. So the pacing in this has always been odd. We have these isolated quests with the overarching plot, but because it's a comic, I don't think that the writers do a very good job of balancing the singular quest-based storylines and the overarching plot, with one volume in here just not really, like, abandoning the main plot altogether in a very confusing way, which kind of makes sense overall, but when you're reading these and not rereading them and just going in and leaving gaps between the comics, it can become very confusing. Now, something that was very strange about this last installment is that it followed the typical pace of Rat Queens. You know, we had these singular quests with a little bit of a hint of that overarching plot, but I just really wanted more of the plot because this was the final volume. And then bizarrely, after building up to the resolution of this conflict for 4-5 volumes, when we got to the conflict, it completely skipped over it and went to the after events. It was just really strange. There is, I don't know, that this was the final volume ever as well, because they haven't officially announced that it is, but they also haven't announced any new ones coming. But right at the end of this, there is a page that says it ain't over yet, which implies that they may be coming back at a later date and continuing the story of the queens. I don't think that I'm going to be continuing with this, because going from how strong it was to how it is in this last volume was just really disappointing, to the point where like I don't really have any interest in this series anymore. I then read a novella which I really loved, which is very surprising for me because I'm not a novella person, but that was the first novella in Skyward Flight, so this much, it's like 160 pages, by Brandon Sanderson and John C. Patterson. So this is a bind up of all of the novellas that go with Brandon Sanderson's Skyward series, which is his YA, or one of his YA sci-fi series, where we're following a girl called Spencer who wants nothing nothing more than to be a fighter pilot. However, her father was branded as a deserter when she was a child, and this has affected everything about her family. Like, her family aren't allowed real jobs because of what her father did, and so the authorities and everybody who's like in power in this flight school are doing everything they can to stop Spencer from being able to join the school. I really liked book 1, didn't really like book 2, and I was a little bit nervous about these because I don't really love novellas. However, I really liked this and I gave it 4 stars. So the reason why I don't really like book 2 is that plot wise and character development wise, it's pretty much a repeat of book 1, and it's missing my favorite thing about Skyward, which is the characters. Skyward Flight. And so the one thing that I really loved about this is we are back with those characters that I loved that we missed out a lot on in the second book in this series. Now, the plot of this novella is not especially riveting. It is about not a character from Skyward, it's about Doomslug, but Doomslug as a species, not as an individual character. So this is a novella about slugs, but it didn't even matter because I was just there for the vibes of the characters that I've come to love across the first book, and this has reignited my interest in this series because I'm just not really looking forward to Cytonic based on Starsight. I've also been told that based on what I didn't like about Starsight, I'm probably not going to like Cytonic, which once again is very disappointing. But I had a good time with the novella anyway, being back with those characters, seeing them interact with slugs, and I'm actually really excited to continue on with the novellas in here. I have to read the second one, which is about 200 pages, and then Cytonic, and then I can come back and finish this bind up. I then picked up a thriller, which was exactly what I needed, and I am now in a huge thriller mood based on this. It wasn't even a particularly great thriller. It was The Golden Couple by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen, and I gave it 3 stars. So like I said, not a great thriller. It was a high 3 though, because what I really want from a thriller is I want it to be engaging, compelling, and I want it to surprise me. And in some ways this did surprise me, but in other ways it was just a little bit too much. Like, thrillers don't have to be high rated as long as the experience of reading them is enjoyable, for me anyway. So this one follows a couple, your typical like pretty well off suburban couple who everybody thinks are perfect. Like, they're gorgeous, they have a nice house, a lot of money, perfect child, but unfortunately the wife has been unfaithful. So she takes her husband to therapy. She doesn't even tell him she's been unfaithful until they get there, and the therapist they choose has lost her license because of unorthodox practice. She essentially snuck into somebody's house, like one of her clients, and filmed them to help her client have like a moment of awakening and see his spouse in like a true light, I guess. And her license was revoked, but her therapy is actually known to work. So even though she's not licensed, she still practices. So we have 2 perspectives in this one. One is the therapist and one is the wife, and I was very surprised going into this that it opens up kind of telling you why the therapist lost her license, because my expectations going in was that we were going to start following the couple going through the therapy process, and as the therapy went on I expected it to get weirder and weirder. However, that is just really not the plot of this. I would say it's a domestic thriller. I don't really know a lot about types of thrillers, but that is what my guess would be. Please let me know if I'm right. And I'm not very good at reviewing thrillers. You guys know this because I don't read a lot of them, and like I said, they don't even have to be highly rated. I just have to enjoy them. The reason why I gave this 3 stars, I guess, is it's very, not necessarily slow because it is engaging, but it's not especially pacey in terms of events throughout here. You can very clearly see where the authors are laying down their plot points, and you can see what is going to come into play later on and become relevant, but the actual conclusion of this book and things coming together only happens very late on in the book. So until that point you just have all of these pieces floating around and you don't really know how they fit together until you get quite near the end. And when you do get to that point, there were just too many plot twists for me. The first one was good. I enjoyed it. The second one was really unnecessary and a little bit gimmicky. They just had too many points essentially that they had to tie together, so everything at the end just seemed to be tied up a little bit too neatly because everything had to come together, and it had to come together in the last like however many pages of this book. But I did enjoy it. I found it interesting. It took me out of my headspace for a little while, and it helped me with my slump because it's not something that I would typically read. Maybe wouldn't recommend this for the seasoned thriller reader, but like if you are a seasoned thriller reader, I doubt you're really here watching my channel for thriller recommendations, because I'm not, it's not what I'm good at. I then DNF'd a book which I almost forgot about. I made it 304 pages into this book before I decided not to continue. A lot of you guys are going to be really sad about this, but trust me, I am also sad about it because this month I DNF'd Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Ames. This is an adult fantasy with one of my favorite tropes, which is like retired mercenaries having to like get back together and do the damn thing for one final time. And I thought I was gonna love this. It's actually in a 5-star predictions video. I thought I was going to enjoy it that much. I've resisted picking it up because I thought I was going to love it, and there were elements that I did like about this but elements that I didn't. So in this one we are following a guy called Clay who is in his, I think they're in like their early 40s, but he was once a part of this really famous mercenary band called Saga, and since then he's retired, he's away from the fame, he has a house with his wife, he has a kid, he's happy, but his friend, one of his band members, turns upon his doorstep and essentially begs him to get the band back together or to help him get the band back together so they can go and save his daughter Rose, who growing up with a father who was a mercenary and a legend has kind of wanted to follow in his footsteps, joined up with a band and gone to the city to help to save it, but it is currently being besieged by like hundreds of thousands of monsters. So Clay pretty much knows that this is a suicide mission and he's not into it, but he loves his friend, they're practically brothers, so he agrees to go on this journey. The selling point of this for a lot of people is the humor, and I didn't think it wasn't funny, but it wasn't really giving me any laugh out loud moments either, so it wasn't like 100% hitting in that element. I did really like the characters. I liked how you could feel the brotherhood between the band, and also how they had like banter and stuff because they've known each other for a long time, and also just like the old man vibes, you know, like they're trying to perform to the standard they used to perform. They're doing like this impossible mission, but they're old, like they're past it now, they're not at the peak of their fitness like they were, and so it is a little bit of a struggle. However, the one thing that really killed it for me that I didn't like was the plot and the pacing. This is incredibly fast paced. I would say it's probably like 50% plot, 50% characters, because a lot of the enjoyment does hinge on enjoying this like band of mercenaries, but it's very much like an adventure story where it's just event after event after event, and you guys know me, I don't get on with fast paced books. I struggle to focus and retain information because it's just not giving me enough to keep me hooked, and so I got to about 200 and something pages into this and stopped enjoying it altogether, but I was going to persevere until I got to around the page 300 mark, and I realized that I was just dragging my feet on picking this up. I didn't want to read it anymore. If I continued to read this, it would only be because I wanted to love it, not because I was actually enjoying it in any way, shape or form, and so sadly I decided to put this one down and I will not be continuing. And then the final book that I managed to read in May is one that I thought I was going to enjoy and really did, which is great, and that was Savage Lands by Stacey Marie Brown. I actually met Stacey Marie Brown in May as well, because when my vlog comes you will see that I went to a romance festival, which was a great time and has me hyped to read so much romance and fantasy romance right now. But this is one that I picked up because I've seen it in so many recommendations videos. Actually, I don't watch book talk, but I've seen this book recommended alongside Fortuna Swan by KJ Sutton solely when Kelsey, who is KJ Sutton, reposts people's TikToks into her Instagram story. So it's a very roundabout way that I found this series, but I can say that if you like Fortuna Swan, you will probably like this. It is very different, but I also see why they're being recommended alongside each other. So this one is, I don't want to say right now that it's a fairy romance story, but it is a fantasy romance with fae in it, and it is a plotty one as well. So if you like the Plated Prisoner series by Raven Kennedy, you also might like this. So it is romantic. It's going to turn romantic further in the series, but it is a fantasy series with a plot, and there is a lot of plot in the book. I kind of want to say it's urban fantasy, but I feel like it's more, it just feels dystopian to me. It's delivering like Divergent meets Red Queen, but like adult fantasy romance, and it's set in the city of Budapest, and I think 20-ish years ago the barrier between the world of humans and fae fell, leaving the magic to surge throughout the world. This created the Fae Wars, and eventually everyone kind of regained control of the city, and they're separated now. So the humans live in one part, the fae live in the other part, and then there is an area that is called the Savage Lands, which is just kind of like the Wild West, I guess. Our main character Brexley is the daughter of a general, and she was actually born at the moment that the veil fell, which we all know is going to be quite poignant prince, and her father died during the Fae Wars, so she is actually the ward of the king, and she is in love with her best friend, who is the prince. But very quickly into this, the equilibrium changes. Even though Brexley is quite privileged, she spends her evenings stealing drugs to put onto the streets, which doesn't sound good, but it essentially keeps the money from the drugs out of the hands of the elite and into the hands of the people who actually need it. One day she's caught and she's taken to this horrible prison. So that is kind of the plot. There's a lot more going on here, but because of how slowly it kind of builds, and also the fact that like I don't know what the overarching plot of this series is yet, that's all I can really give you. But I will say content warnings, because this is dark. Like, content warnings for sexual assault, mention of sexual assault throughout this entire thing. It's pretty grim. There's a whole ton of torture, lots of whipping, all of that kind of stuff, so do be cautious going into this one. But I do like myself a dark story, so I was into it. It's hard to describe why I liked this, because there isn't a whole ton in the way of romance. There's only kind of inklings there, aside from the stuff that we have very early on with the best friend. I feel like we're going to be setting up some sort of love triangle in here, and actually I'm really into it. But this didn't sell me on one of those love triangle elements until we got to the end, and the end of this was so good. Like, it wasn't bad at the beginning. I would say the first 100 pages, decent, I was intrigued. Second 100 pages, better. Last 100 pages, oh my god, I need to read the sequel immediately, and I have actually ordered it, so I'm hoping to pick that up very soon. Throughout reading this book, it was very clear that it was set up, because you knew at the beginning and you knew throughout the middle that this series couldn't stay like this for the entirety, and that it had to change at some point, and until it changed we didn't really know where the story was going. So I would say it's a very good introduction. I gave it 4 stars. I definitely anticipate giving further installments in this series 5 stars if it continues at this level, and it's pretty compulsively readable as well, so even though I didn't do it, I'm pretty sure you could read this book in like 1 or 2 sittings. Would definitely recommend. Very excited to continue. Just as a side note, because I didn't finish any more books, but I got to, I think, around 100 pages into You and Me on Vacation by Emily Henry in May as well, and I now have about 100 pages left, so you can expect this to be the first book that I finish in June. But that is it. Those are the 5 books in the 1 DNF I read in the month of May. Fingers crossed for a better reading month for June. I'm feeling it. I want to read, but I also have a very small hairy baby to look after, and then I was gonna say a bigger hairy baby. Ham and the pup are actually about the same size right now, which is really weird, but it won't stay that way for long. But I do have Hammy to look after as well, and make sure he's sat on the chair now with me. He's excited that she's not currently running rampant. But yeah, hands full with pet parenting right now, but hopefully also lots of reading. So down in the comments, let me know what your favorite book that you read in May is. But aside from that, guys, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you wanna. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish Candle website, the Etsy for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye.
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you will go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.